Welcome to the first distance learning package on the music makers. A few general things before we start. Firstly, big thanks to Ruth Provost, Ruth Matthew, Tristan Moore and especially Michael for making the videos for us, and to Brad for pulling the whole thing together as always. Secondly, this is rather harder music than the other music we've been working on in these sessions. So you may find there is more time needed to get the hang of it, and in some passages it may prove harder to sing on your own at home than the Bainton or My Folk Songs or Zadok. But if you find yourself having to work hard or being frustrated because you cannot get every note right, remember this is just a stage building towards singing together one day, and that any work you will do will be useful in the long term. Hopefully also fun, but probably a little bit harder work than what we've done so far, because the Music Makers is a tricky piece. The parts split from time to time, and I'm afraid both in terms of time and cost, it has not been possible to record separate tracks for all the split bits separately. There's not too many of them, but this may prove an irritation. So, sopranos, altos and tenors will find that where it splits, the singers on the video sing the second part only. Apologies to the firsts in those parts, though of course the first sopranos can hear their part fairly clearly on the YouTube recording provided. For the basses, you will hear the first bass part and not the second, partly because that is my range, and partly because, again, it is a bit easier to pick out the second bass part from listening to a full recording. My notes at the very bottom end, as you know, are not particularly helpful or audible anyway. But that's maybe only, less than a tenth of the piece where it splits. Finally, some of the faster sections you will find are not up to the actual speed on our videos. This follows a request after previous distance learning packages that we have something slower for ease of learning. Similarly, there's one or two passages where it says stringendo, in other words, to speed up. There's one of these towards the end of today's section, and we've just simply ignored that. We will put the faster speeds and the speeds up into the music once we get back together. I've now lost my place in my notes. Give me a second. We'll be having 7 sessions on this piece on 7 different sections of the piece. Today's session is looking at page 5 through to page 17. Now remember that you've got 4 ways of learning. You can listen or sing with the full video of us all singing, or you can just use the video of your own part, or you can use the YouTube of the full orchestral version, or you can revert to using the John Fletcher site. Probably a combination of all those things will be quite useful. Now, Elgar is not so thorough as Bainton in marking in breathing, so there'll be quite a lot of these to mark in, I'm afraid. It'll obviously help if you mark them in at this stage, so that we don't have to spend too much time when we get together. So, starting page 1, we have the words and the chords of the sort of motto theme, We Are the Music Makers, which comes several times in the piece, and with which the piece eventually ends. In these slow sections, be especially careful to put the words across. In the loud dramatic sections, it would probably be difficult not to, but in these bits you have to think about it. Everyone, please put a quaver breath after makers in the first phrase, and make sure that the S is together, and then no breath after dreams. For this section, any breath I ask for will be a quaver out of the note unless said otherwise. Make sure all crescendos and diminuendos in Elgar are strong. This is very expressive music. Basses at the foot of page 5. Make sure you do not stop when the rest of the choir does, but take a breath at the end of the word dreams, a beat and a half after everybody else. Page 6. Everyone a breath after breakers, and then ATB, one after streams. At the end of page 6, watch out that the orchestra drops out again for 3 bars. Be ready not to be wrong-footed there. Then on page 7, a breath after gleams, and immediately cut the word yet to a quaver with a unanimous T, please. On the bottom line, no breath after movers, but tenors and basses cut wee short by a quaver. Now, a general word about the staccatos. Not many composers write staccato notes for choirs, but Elgar did, and he did it a lot, and we know from his own recordings that he really meant it. Every time there is a staccato note, simply cut the value in half. For example, at the bottom of page 7, the tenors and the basses have two kinds of staccatos. On the word yet, you'll see the wedge-shaped staccato mark, a super staccato as it's sometimes called. We're going to treat this as meaning both accented and staccato, so yet becomes an accented quaver. A bar later, the tenors and bass parts have an ordinary staccato on and, so this becomes a semiquaver. That's now our general rule for both kinds of staccatos. I won't mention this again here on unless there's an exception or it needs particularly strongly pointing out. At the end of page 7, a very short breath after world, effectively taking the dot off the note and having a semiquaver breath. Basses, be careful not to breathe early as the rest of the choir changes note here. At the top of page 8, basses breathe after the first ever, but no one breathe, please, after the word ever in the second bar. Note also that this is F, F, F right the way until the word it, and then a very fast dim. A lot of choirs will start going quiet sooner than that, but it's not what it says. No breath, breaking our usual comma rule in the last 3 bars on this page. Then the mood changes and I'm beating 1 to a bar. Note the super staccatos from everyone on 4 notes at the bottom of page 9. All of these will be semiquavers. On page 10, ATB, no breath between the second and third bars, but a quick one for A and T after story. ATB, no breath between the 2 fabulouses at the bottom of the page. In the bar before figure 18, the basses breathe before we fashion. Then on this next session, we have to watch out for a tricky rhythm on the word empires in each part. So just have a listen to the basses rhythm. We fashion an empire's glory. So you have to sort of go out of 6/8 into 2/4 for a moment and then back into 6/8. So that will take some getting used to. You cannot really sing those phrases just by enjoying it. You can only really do it by thinking every single one. And there's lots more of those in all parts in this at the end of this section and in the next section. Sopranos, no breath after empires at the foot of the page. Altos knock the dot off just before the last note of the page to grab a very quick breath. The last bar of 20, altos and basses quaver breath, but not the sops and tenors. Sopranos think up on the top G at the top of page 13. Everything about this note, the length, the dynamic, the fact it's about to go down, the chord beneath it, as if Elgar was hoping for you to sing it flat. So you have to think very high and the usual trick of imagining it's about to go up. And count carefully, everybody, so that you don't miss the change of note in the last 2 bars of the word. Everyone take a breath at the end of the word dream at the top of page 13. We are going to ignore the comma printed at the end of the line. At figure 21, again, think sharp and count. Tenors take a breath before the last bar. On page 14, both tenors and basses breathe after the first pleasure, and then sopranos and altos after pleasure at the bottom of the page. After that, there are no more breaths to mark in this section. Remember where it says F, such as the top of page 14, that it's only F. Leave room to grow for the FF passages, otherwise it can sound rather relentless. Again on page 14, watch out for the duplity rhythm on shallow, wherever it comes. Page 15, in the 5th and 8th bars, make sure we have the N together exactly where it says. And in the last bar of 15, Watch out for the word trample. There genuinely is a rest in the middle of that, and in the middle of the word kingdom at the start of the next phrase. So that goes against the grain, but that's what Elgar wants. Tenors and basses. Your trample a kingdom down, descending scale. Watch out, every step there is a tone. That'll feel very strange, like Elgar has suddenly decided to be Debussy for a few minutes, although they were very, very opposite, both in terms of character and music, although round about the same time, of course. No breath in the first bar of 17, altos, tenors, basses, and then on the triple F chord on down, basses put the note, put the N on the final tied quaver. So that's the end of the first session. I hope you enjoy working on this exciting music.